Good evening. This is the Northwest College 1010 class, meeting number 3, February 10, 2014. I would recommend some notes out. I would recommend that you have the last packet number 2 in front of you. So I have that now in front of you. And I'm going to make now some observations that I hope will make some sense. As I think I said to you before, our projects in the evening will always involve 3 things. 1, we're going to comment always on the packet of this evening. 2, we're going to comment on the packet of the next session. And then 3, a series of observations that will be of importance for you going forward. I want to begin, first of all, by commenting on the packets now that I've already seen. Packet number 2. You may jot down some notes here on packet number 2. You may want to comment on, for yourself, on the packet number 3 of this evening's packet, whatever, however you want to think about this. Some general observations, though, about these packets. 1, it's hypercritical. If you're looking to get a C or higher in a 1010 class, you have to give some consideration to deadline competency. That is to say, if the packet is due on a Monday evening, then you want to be sure that you get it into me as close to Monday evening as possible. If you're going to be absent, you can have someone deliver your packet to me on that evening, or make sure you get it to me on the next day, Tuesday. Wednesday at the latest for my read rotation, all right? So make sure that you discipline yourself to be sure that you get the packets in as close to on time as possible. If you have to miss, then you want to try to explain with some kind of note on the cover sheet. That's what the cover sheet is for, to explain it to me. Number 2, your cover sheets need to be typed, and all information for the most part on the cover sheet is typed. Any kind of special notes or whatever can be handwritten. I would recommend that any kind of special notes being given to me be done with red ink, all right? That's my recommendation. And Ms. Kellogg, at this point, I would be paying hyper attention to what I'm saying now and not worry about it. You can do that, later, okay? So your ability to type your cover sheets, because I can't give you much for points if you don't follow the fundamental rules of a 1010 course. That includes the need now to type your essays. Everything you're handing in to me is typed. Okay, guys, this is critical. Right away, and we'll have more to say about this, but when I say typed, I also mean manuscript submissions, which means 10-point Times New Roman. Make sure you're double spacing everything so that as you hand in your papers to me, I have the capacity to read them cleanly. Now this evening, if you're not going to have a 10-point Times New Roman double-spaced type paper and just some type paper, you might put a note to me on the cover sheet that you failed to understand what manuscript meant. Okay? Next, anything you hand in to me needs to have been proofed and to have been reviewed before you submit it to me. All right? So don't hand anything in to me that hasn't gone through a pretty good editing before you give it to me. Because if I find lots of errors in the material you're giving to me, I'm going to have to give you a lower score. And that you don't want to have happen. All right? Finally, you want to make sure that you staple as a unit your packet. The table of contents or your cover sheet serves as a table of contents. In other words, the order that we provide this information and you type it on your cover sheet needs to be the order of the actual packet, beginning with the cover sheet and then following. So every week as we outline this, first, of course, the packet due for the evening, you always want to make sure that your cover sheet displays that. Now, if you find yourself sitting in class on a Monday night and you realize that, I misunderstood or I didn't get something correctly done or whatever, you can always hand in to me Tuesday morning then your packet. So in other words, you can take the rest of Monday evening after class, you can finish, you can compile the information and hand it off to me sometime before noon on Tuesday morning here at this high school. Again, just handing it to the office, and they'll give it to me through the box. You will, of course, on your cover sheet explain to me why it is that you had to give this to me on Tuesday morning as opposed to Monday night. And again, that's special information that you just give to me on your cover sheet. The cover sheet then is the way that you and I communicate by and large. Does that make sense? So in other words, you let me know the issues that are involved in the packet that you're submitting to me on the cover sheet. All right? Any questions about that intel? All right, well, let's go forward now, and let's begin by making some observations regarding tonight's Meeting 3 cover sheet. Of course, I hope that you have it in front of you, and I hope that you're now ready to edit it if need be. Okay? And because we're still early in the semester, then I can allow for some kind of changes to your cover sheet this evening by hand. That is okay. All right? If you have too many of these, though, you may want to consider making the changes and then submitting to me tomorrow morning. That will be acceptable. First of all, you should have the Chapter 2 notes, which involve the bullet pointing, both of the information as well as the models, etc. You want to make sure that you have the model titles right now on your cover sheet. So for each one of the titles that are a part of your Meeting 3 Chapter 2 notes, then you should have those titles listed, one right after the other, again, the titles of the models. And this will serve then for the rest of our semester. Anytime you're submitting to me a packet, you want to make sure that you're providing me with the titles of the models and the authors of those models as well. And of course, again, if you've taken proper notes, then you're, of course, going to provide me with the information regarding complete. The second thing you'll give to me are the Chapter 12 notes, which occur from page 584 to 609. And those range of pages should always be provided then on your cover sheet. And again, all this information was just simply bullet pointing over, I believe, active reading. Did I say that correct? I think that's right. These are notes about college academic reading. The third thing that should be listed there is the Grammar Handbook Section G notes. Section G notes. Suggestion. On your cover sheet, this is more for you than for me, always provide what the topic is for these different sections. So what was Section G? The topic overall was, what was it, by the way? What was Section G? The overall topic for Section G notes was what? Grammatical sentences. So you would put Section G, and then maybe in parenthetics, grammatical sentences, just so that you could be sure to not confuse the notes that maybe came from an earlier packet or from a later packet, and you can be sure you're getting the right information handed in. The fourth thing that you'll have listed on your cover sheet will be the Chapter 2 paper, an important event from your life with 3 lessons learned. Okay. I'd like you to look at that paper real quickly. It should be part of your packet already. I'd like you to have your red ink in hand. We are working now with red ink. Reminding you, this was one of the required supplies when I suggested on first night, and there's a reason for that. I'll be doing a lot of that. See, for some of you, you will say, oh, I didn't bring a red ink pen with me. I'll be doing this work later this evening or tomorrow morning, and I'll hand it in. I recommend then you be writing this down so you can remember to get it done. Because whatever I'm going over now, I'm going to score it as available in your packet. Obviously, if you've missed this, then you're going to lose points. And the only thing I'm interested in for this evening's essay is that you number 1, 2, and 3 in the right-hand margin next to the 3 things that you learned, that you are saying you learned in your paper. So find that real quickly. I think we articulated there should be 1 paragraph for each one of these lessons learned or things learned. Go ahead and identify in the, I said right-hand margin. If you want to put it on the left, that'll be fine as long as it's there and visible for me. And I'll understand the coding of a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3, all right? And primarily the reason why we're doing this is to make sure for you that it got done. If it didn't get done, then obviously you're not handing in your packet this evening. That would be dumb. You'd want to hand it in to get the most points possible. The points are obviously cumulative through our semester, and so you want to try and get as many as you can. Okay. The last thing that you're going to write down on your cover sheet, if it's not already there, will be TC, short for Teaching Company Flow Lectures, numbers 1 and I think this evening that's all that I'm going to have you do is just one of these. All right, so lecture number 1. All right, lecture 1. Okay. All right, and then at the bottom you should have again your diagnostics as you wrote them. That intel is there. That primarily for us, by the way, is for record keeping. Every week you will always receive your packet back. Strong recommendation. Throw nothing away until the end of our semester, and then maybe even not even then. Hold on to everything. That way if there's a discrepancy in regards to how a score for you is recorded, you have it, right? You have the packet itself. So I would say don't ever throw away those packet cover sheets, especially the cover sheets, because the cover sheets are where I will assign your points, right? You always want to hold on to those. Do you have any questions for me about this evening's packet? All right, let's keep going then, and we'll now talk about meeting number 4 and meeting number 5. If you look at your course outline for a moment, you will see that meeting number 4, February 17, is what we call a workshop evening. And I'm going to go ahead and give this evening to you as nothing more than simply a workshop evening. What does that mean? It means that no class attendance is required, only work. So in other words, the amount of work that I'm about to assign to you will require maybe an additional week of work, research, working in the library, maybe the traveling to the Northwest College campus to work in the library if you feel like that's necessary. Certainly your online work as well in preparation for the packet that will follow the next week. Let's now review it. Meeting number 5, and that's what it will say, February the 24th plans. Meeting number 5, February 24th plans. I'm now outlining with you your cover sheet. And what a lot of students will do is they literally take a blank sheet of paper out now, and they will just write down everything as I say it, and then that allows for them to go home and simply type up the new cover sheet, probably saving the old cover sheet as a template, and then just adding information as we go, right? Of course, I've already said this will be meeting number 5. It is slated for February 2-4, and you'll be working with the following assignments. 1, your Chapter 3 bullet points, along with your Chapter 3 models, and I need the term now, paragraph outline as part of that. We'll have more to say about that here in a moment. Paragraph outline for your models. Okay? You will want to list each one of those models by name and by author and by page number, where they appear in Axelrod Cooper. Okay, this again is for our record keeping. Number 2, Grammar Handbook Section E. Grammar Handbook Section E. Okay? Same kind of notes as before. Number 3, the NWCC Hinckley Library Tutorials. Now I'll explain what that means in a second. By the way, this is not on your course outline. Okay, again I'll say it. NWCC Hinckley Library Tutorials. Number 1, finding, this is the topic of the first tutorial, finding the Hinckley Library. Finding the Hinckley Library. Now, if you will just take a look at my whiteboard, I'm just making a correction here on my camera just so that our students can observe. I'd like to walk you to this spot here real quickly, all right? So you're going to go to the Northwest College site, all right? So let's talk it through real quickly, all right? And we'll look at now the Northwest College site. And I'm going to walk you to this site. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is to find the Northwest College site. I'm just Googling this information to find it. I'm showing you how you can actually find this, all right? And you'll see that you can easily find this through Northwest College. It's called www.northwestcollege.edu. So you want to write that down, okay, because you're going to be hitting this site over and over again. Of course, most of you are somewhat familiar with this site already. And when you go to this site, and now I've got it on the whiteboard, take a look at it real quickly. This is, of course, what our home page looks like. Now you're going to scroll down on the home page to over here where it says Quick Links. See, so you're writing all this down. Don't rely on your memory. Of course, I am filming this session tonight, so you can always go back to learnstrong.net if there's any of this intel you need to have reviewed. And you're going to hit what's called Hinckley Library. Do you see that? So you're going to just click on Hinckley Library. All right? And that's going to take you to the Hinckley Library. The name of the library on the campus of Northwest College is called Hinckley. And it's going to take you to this page where you're going to look for the Help section under the Quick Links. The Help section is in the third category. Do you see it right here? And you're going to go down to Video Tutorials. Video Tutorials. Does everybody see that? And you're going to click on that Video Tutorials. All right? And then you're going to see a series of tutorials that are listed first on this left-hand side. Does everybody see that? All right? If you don't have a version of Flash Player, you can download it right here for free by clicking on this. Okay? And then you're going to go to the very first one of these. Now all you're doing, notice this one is only 4 minutes long. It's a very brief tutorial. All you're going to do is just take notes over the information as it is presented. That's all. All right? So you're going to hit the play button, and the only one you have to work with for next meeting is this one right here, Finding Hinckley Library's website. And you want to put that on your cover sheet as the tutorial titled number 1. All right? Now, Hinckley Library does not number these as number 1, number 2, number 3, as you can see. They simply work with a cross-referencing of a title. I'm going to go ahead and call it Hinckley Tutorial Library Tutorial number 1. Obviously, the next one will be number 2. But I'll always give you what the topic is, all right? So you know which one you're looking at, all right? And you can see as I scroll down, some of these are a little bit longer. Here's a 15-minute one. A few weeks later, you'll have an 18-minute one, a 10.5-minute one, a 14-minute one, that kind of thing. And then I'm going to have a couple of these on the other side over here that I want you to watch. All of them will come from this website. Everybody groovy with that? Okay. So to just return then, I just want to go back now that on the cover sheet here, again, this is the NWCC Hinckley Library Tutorial number 1, Finding the Hinckley Library Database. All right? Number 4, the fourth thing that will be listed on your cover sheet will be Chapter 3 Paper. Chapter 3 Paper. Now this one is on page 103. Go ahead and look at it now with me, as we always will do. We'll take a look at the actual assignment itself. Okay? Chapter 3 Paper. The topic of this paper is called Writing Profiles. Writing Profile, okay? And I'm with you now on page 103. You're going to write an essay. Read it with me on page 103. You're going to write an essay about an intriguing person, place, or activity in your community. You're going to observe your subject closely and then present what you've learned in a way that both informs and engages the reader. The only thing I'm adding to this assignment that is not on page 103 will sound very similar to what we assigned for Chapter 2. I want you to, at the very end of your essay, provide 3 paragraphs, 3 things of importance about this person that you've learned, or this event, or this place. Okay? So in the first part of your essay, you're simply going to describe, maybe for most of you, the easy thing to do is to describe an intriguing person that you know. Right? So you're going to describe your grandmother, for example. All right? Describe her from 2 perspectives. 1, outside. Describe the way she looks. 2, inside. Attitudes. The way she thinks. The kind of person that she is in terms of her emotions and her feelings. And then when you finish the essay's description part, again, 3 paragraphs describing what it is you've learned of importance from this person. Not unlike the essay that you're handing in this evening. All right? And it will shock you not at all to hear that next week we'll do the same kind of gig, the next session, we'll do the same gig where I'll have you jot down 1, 2, and 3 things of importance about this person. Okay? Any questions? Finally, you can list TC for teaching company lecture number 2. Every session we'll listen to at least one lecture that you will take notes over. And the next session will be over number 2. All right? And you'll notice that's always the last thing you'll staple to your packet. Why? Because everything else, we hope, you will have done before you come to class, right? And then in class, we'll have you flow that lecture, and then you'll put it to the back of your packet and you'll staple it. All right? Questions, concerns? Do we all kind of know what we're doing? So there's your cover sheet for our next session. Next time we meet, we will, however, call it session number 5. All right? Following our course outline. I want to talk now for a few minutes, and if it was me, I would get out now a blank sheet of paper for note-taking. You said something here a second ago about we're going to do a paragraph outline annotation. Now, that's a term you used. I really am interested in a number of the words of that term that you used. So we're going to now take a little bit of notes on the concept of academic reading. Now, in the lecture that we gave on the academic community, we postulated 2 important skill sets. Do you remember? We said there are 2 things, skill set-wise, that we're going to spend our time with at the academic level. The first of those, you'll recall, was reading, and the second, of course, was writing. Now I want to talk about this academic reading. Okay? Academic reading. Now, as opposed to what kind of reading? What's another kind of reading? Well, we can have another kind of reading as simply what we will call social reading, what some people call non-academic reading. When you pick up, for example, a Stephen King novel and you start reading, when you get to the end of the first chapter, you don't go, wait a minute, what was the name of the guy working behind the counter? I need to go back and look at that. No, right? When you pick up, for example, a Sports Illustrated or a Cosmopolitan magazine, you just start reading, you're just reading for basic information and for entertainment purposes. That is not academic reading. So as we now turn to academic reading, we're going to define this quite differently. We are reading with a purpose. That's a key, the word purpose. And we understand that the primary purpose is that we can respond in some way to an academic who is giving us the work to read. Our response can be of 2 kinds. It can be an oral response, or it can be a written response of some kind, right? So, for example, I could quite literally ask, after Chapter 7 of a history textbook, 3 Causes of the American Civil War, I could literally just come in and say, I am now ready to give the exam. Each of you will have 5 minutes to speak on the question which I will give from Chapter 7 of the history book. When I ask the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare for a response. Timer starts at the end of 30 seconds. You have 5 minutes to speak. You will be graded accordingly. Mr. Logan, we will begin with you. Please address the first cause of the American Civil War as articulated in Chapter 7 of your textbook. You have 30 seconds to prepare, and at the end of 30 seconds, you will shut your notebooks and you will begin to speak. Now, for those of you that are saying, well, that's a little bit different from an essay test or a multiple choice test, you would have to agree with me, right. Why would some of my colleagues in the history department like this form of testing? Right away, what am I going to be able to find out about Mr. Logan and his ability to read that information and understand it? See how that works? Right? If he didn't read it, it's going to be awfully hard for him to cheat on this kind of test. Would you agree with me? Right? Now, a multiple choice test, he might be able to scan his buddy's paper, right? Or he might even get some intel via the net or something, right, to help him on a test of a multiple choice or an essay style test. But an oral response, kind of hard to wing that one. You either know it or you don't. Now, for those of us who are a little bit freaked out by sitting in a classroom with 50 other students, and now all of a sudden we got 5 minutes, we got to talk, and it's our grade on the line, then for some of us, we realize this may be another skill set that I didn't even mention last time, right? Our purposes in a 10-10 class, though, are to help us primarily with the second response, the written response. That can come in any number of ways. It can come, of course, in regards to an exam that might be given, multiple choice, true, false, short answer. It could come in the form of an essay-style instrument where, for example, Mr. Logan is not asked by me, the instructor, to say in front of the class. He is just given that assigned topic, and he has to write in either an in-class timed writing or an out-of-class paper that he might write. Okay? A term paper is sometimes the old-fashioned terminology here, and that just simply means a paper that is written normally outside of class. All of these are what we mean by a written response. Okay? Now, how to prepare for this response is what we're going to talk about now in the term annotation. Okay? Now, when we use this term, what we mean is reading and taking notes. That's what we mean. Reading and taking notes, which is something we normally don't do if we're working with a Stephen King novel. Would you agree with me? Right? But when we are reading, for example, out of Axelrod Cooper, we are reading and taking notes. Why do we take the notes? So that we can prepare for our response, whether it's oral or written. Okay? Now, these notes are of two kinds. They can either be in text annotation or out of text annotation. Okay? In text annotation literally means that you write notes in the very book where you're reading. If you, for example, had purchased this Axelrod Cooper volume, then you literally could be taking notes in the book itself. Of course, this is one of the huge shocks for students who leave high school and move on to college or university. They are asked to purchase their books. Those books are purchased for the explicit reason of being able to read them in such a way that I can derive information, so we take notes. Internal annotation is what we often will call this. Internal annotation. External annotation, however, are the notes that we take off the page. Any monkey with an El Marco can mark up a book. Having a bunch of colors inside of your book doesn't, in and of itself, mean that you're really getting and deriving the information. External annotations are notes that are taken on a sheet of notebook paper. These external annotative notes are of three kinds. One, what we will call pre-class note-taking. Two, what we will call in-class note-taking. And finally, three, what we will call post-class annotations or notes. Students will often struggle in their freshman level courses to get their reading done because there are two different kinds of reading. There is this academic reading, but there's also this thing that we call social reading, right? That's the reading of a Sports Illustrated or whatever. A student of mine graduated from high school and went to college. She was a nursing student and was rooming with another nursing student. At week number 6, my student had an A in the class, and her roommate had a D in the class. And her roommate came to her and said, I don't understand what's going on. We're in the same classes, and you're getting an A and I'm getting a D, and I need to understand why, because I'm starting to get really torqued off about this. And my student said to her, well, let me see your textbook. And she said, what do you mean, see my textbook? It's the exact same book you have. It's that stupid, boring biology book. Why do you need to see my book? And my student said, I'm only interested in knowing whether you're reading it or not. Now her roommate got mad. What do you mean whether I'm reading it or not? Every night you see me sitting in this stupid dorm room reading this stupid book. Of course I'm reading it. And my student said, no. I need to understand if you're reading the book, not just reading the book. And her roommate was like, now you're just trying to piss me off. And she said, well, hand me the book and let me look and see. And sure enough, she opened the book, and the book looked like it had the day she had bought the book. No notes, no annotations, no internal notes of any kind. And she said, well, where are your annotations? My student asked, where are your annotations? Her roommate said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, here's the problem. In this class, you and I both have the same book. You're reading the book. I'm reading the book. And that's the difference in our grade. Her roommate said, what do you mean you're reading the book different from me? And my student picked up her book, opened it, and showed all kinds of notes made with red ink in the margins on the page. She said, these are what we call internal annotation notes. But that's not all. She then opened her notebook, which was properly organized by chapters. The chapter, for example, she was referencing, she showed all of these external annotations that had been taken. Those notes were on a sheet of paper with a line down the center of the page. An annotative approach that I'm going to suggest you employ. On the left-hand side of that line, in red ink, these are what we call our pre-class notes. Okay? We're taking these notes on the left-hand side of the line with red ink. Why red ink? Because we're already taking red ink when we're working with our in-class annotations. Make sense? So you don't even have to switch the pen. You've got the red pen in your hand, taking notes on the left-hand side of the line. Always beginning with login information that correlates to the pages from the book. Makes sense? So if we're working with Chapter 7 of the history text, we're going to say Chapter 7 at the login. We're also going to put the page numbers there that correlates, so that what we're doing in the text correlates with what we're doing as our external annotation notes. Okay? Then there's going to be a series of notes that are taken down the left-hand side. Those notes will vary depending upon the discipline that we're working with. For example, if we're working with history, Chapter 7, 3 Causes of the American Civil War, anything in bold we'll probably write down, and we'll try to define any kind of special words that get used. Obviously, if we're talking history, we're talking about dates and the like. Makes sense? In other words, anything that we think might be important in the textbook, we're going to put it right there on the left-hand side of the line. If we're working math, for example, we're going to work the sample problems. We're going to do all of this before we come to class. Okay? Before we come to math class, we're going to work through the information on our own. Okay? A colleague of mine lectures a freshman math class at the university. He'll give the assignment on the first night. He lets everybody go. He comes in for the second session. He walks in front of the group of some 100 and some odd kids and says, does anybody have a question on the assignment? The freshmen are, of course, sitting there dumbfounded. They thought they were going to show up and the math teacher was going to teach them math. And he says, oh, well, if there's no assignment questions, then I'll go ahead and give the next problem set for the next session. And he walks literally out of the classroom, leaving those poor freshmen to ask the TA, dude, what just happened? To which the TA will say, you're supposed to do the math on your own before you come to class. If you have questions, that's why you're here. Well, when does he teach us the math? Way wrong answer. You teach yourself the math through your note-taking with the book. That's why you bought the book. Well, that isn't the way they taught us math in high school. Right. That's right. I could say the same thing about a biology class. Remember, I told you, I began a lot of my work talking with valedictorians from high school who were dropping out because they were flunking. One of the reasons is because high school instructors had done it all for them, told them everything they needed to know for the exam. We do not assume that an instructor is going to do that for us. Our pre-class notes happening on the left-hand side, again, red ink. Which leads to our second phase of these annotations, what we do in class. This work will be done with blue or black ink, different color ink. Now here's the deal, and it's a simple concept, so listen carefully. There is absolutely no way that most of us can sit in an instructor's lecture and get everything written down. Not a chance. Most instructors are going to talk too fast. I mean, some of you have already kind of figured this out about me. You start talking, and there's just no way I'm going to keep up with it. I can't hear everything you've got to say. Of course, I'm even videotaping so you can go back and watch it again. Most instructors will not do this. So when you come to class, you're actually going to take notes on the right-hand side with a different color ink, and you're looking for two things. One, you're looking for what we call match information. Match information. Anything the instructor says that you already have written down on the left-hand side of the line. If you already have it written down, there's no reason to write it down a second time. If you're sitting in a history lecture and he's talking about the 3 causes of the American Civil War and he hits reason number 1 and you already wrote that down, there's no reason to write it down a second time. All you have to do is circle it, star it, underline it, and you're doing it with a different color ink. The different color ink is the code language for you. This is something the instructor said in class that's also in the book. Dude, if the instructor says it in class and it's in the book, what are the odds it's going to end up on the exam? High or low? If it's in the book and the instructor says it too, what are the odds it's going to end up on the exam? Pretty high, right? So we're always marking the first thing, match information, anything the instructor says that we also wrote down. Number 2, on the right-hand side of the line, anything the instructor says that is not in the book or we didn't write down, we call that new information. And that's what the right-hand side of the line is for. Okay? Where we are taking notes. See, here's the problem for a lot of biology students, and in fact, my student pointed this out to this student who was her friend who was getting a D. She said, here's the problem for you. You're coming to class and waiting for the instructor to teach you biology. 2 problems with that. Way too much intel, because she ain't doing the old overhead on the high school level, the old overhead where you copy everything off of an overhead in the half darkness of the room. Way wrong answer. That's not a university biology class. Here's the problem, though. Way too much intel. You can't write all that down. So you're spending all your time trying to write everything down. The instructor's saying half of what she's saying you're not even hearing. Not even hearing. It's like, while you're writing, you're not listening. You're writing down the last thing she said. Only problem is, by the time you start to attend again, she's moved on to the next concept. But here's the second problem. Even if you got all the information that she's written down that we would qualify as match information, stuff from the book, here's the problem. If you're assuming the night before the exam or 2 nights before the exam, you're going to sit down and read all of the chapter to get ready for the exam, what about all the information that ain't in the textbook? See, think about this for a second. You're not going to know what's new information, stuff not in the textbook, and profs love to do this, until you know what's in the textbook. So you could memorize everything in the textbook the night before the exam and still only get a C if half the information on the exam wasn't the stuff from the textbook, what we're calling match information, but new information. Well, you're not going to know it's new information if you don't know what's in the book. To which her roommate said, well, how do you do that? And she said, you read the book before you come to class. You take notes in red ink. Then when you come to class, you take notes in blue or black ink. You're looking for this new information because, can we say it out loud? If an instructor goes out of his or her way to put new information in the lecture, what are the odds that's going to end up on the exam? Pretty high, huh? Right? Because who makes the exams? The instructor does. Right? Which leads us finally to the third phase, which is, of course, the most important phase, and that's what we do after we leave class. The ability to sit down and prepare for the exam. That's what we are doing here at the third step. And this third step involves understanding what the exam will look like and what it will cover. Would you agree with me? There's a huge difference if I'm sitting in a biology class. There's a huge difference on the chapter of photosynthesis. There's a huge difference between a multiple choice test, a true-false test, a short answer test, or an essay test. Would you agree with me? See, those are different kinds of testing environments. Dude, you got to know that before you show up for the exam. How else are you going to prepare for the exam? See, you have to know what kind of test it's going to look like, and of course, what's it going to cover. Here's the greatest advantage, and this did happen to one of my students, who went up at the end of the exam and said to her history instructor, there were 7 questions on that exam over materials that you did not cover in class. He was obstinate. What are you talking about? She said, I'm sorry, but you didn't cover it in class and it wasn't in the textbook. And he said, I beg to differ. And she said, you beg all you want, but here are my notes. When she showed him her notes, nicely organized, 3-ring notebook, pre-class notes in red ink, in-class notes in blue or black ink, she pointed out, If you can find those 7 questions, and she identified them, you can find those 7 questions, and I will agree. But here it is. This is the and then it hit him, and he started smiling. He said, "Hey, you know what? I gave you guys a test from the last textbook that I worked with, and you're right. Those 7 questions are not covered in the new textbook." She saved not only her grade, but the grade of a lot of other students in class. Of course, his next question was, note-taking. You're a freshman in college. How'd you find... And she said, well, I learned how to annotate. Once I know how to do this active reading thing, this academic reading thing, then I can prepare for exams. Without that level of intelligence, dude, you're playing Russian roulette with your scores. You got no idea what's coming. So why would it shock you that half the time you score poorly on the exam? Especially if you're working with 4 or 5 classes all at the same time. That is way too demanding on your memory. See, some high school students will say, it's easy for me. Well, yeah, but you maybe only have 1 class that really is a demanding class in terms of testing. But what if you have 5 classes that are really demanding? Then you got a different project. Being able to prepare for the exam then has a lot to do with going back and reviewing your annotations. You might look at the book, but most students will discover they really don't need to look at the book after they've done the proper amount of annotative work. They've got everything they need out of the book already in the pre-class notes, and of course they're looking for match information. And they can kind of predict what the test will look like in terms of the types of questions by virtue of the match information. Way over 75% of the information on exams is going to be match information. If it's in the book and the prof says it, then obviously it's going to end up on the exam. Does that make sense? So as you get ready to do this kind of active reading then, learning how to do this is as I said in my last lecture, a skill set that you develop. Okay? Now in our 10-10 class, we gesture towards the 10-20 class. The 10-20 class is the lit course that you're expected to take after you pass the 10-10 class. In the 10-20 class, you do a lot of reading of literature, poems, stories, essays, plays, that kind of garbage, right? As we get ready for that, looking forward, okay, we'll begin to practice then a form of academic annotative work, and we're going to focus primarily on the models of the Axelrod Cooper chapters. There are several of them that are always presented, yes? So for each one of those, we're going to pay particular attention to them, and we're going to do what we call a paragraph outline. Okay? A paragraph outline. Now what does that mean? Good question. I'm glad you asked. If you look on page, in chapter 3, and let's go to and find on page 76, 77. You're going to see, now this will start to make sense to you, 76, 77. You're going to see an example of a certain kind of annotative approach. Do you see it? There's a color coordinating that's going on. What is the textbook company trying to suggest to the new freshman student taking this textbook as the required text? Oh, well, when I read this essay called The Last Stop by Brian Cable, watch my whiteboard, I'm not reading it. I'm reading it. I'm not just reading it the way I would read, for example, a Sports Illustrated article or some online article just for fun. I'm reading it taking notes. Notice those notes are color coordinated to give you a sense of it. But now where I want to go is off to the right of page 76. Do you see those little numbers there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you see it all the way down to the bottom of page 76, number 7? Raise your hand if you do not see what I'm talking about. It's on the right-hand side of the page. What are those numbers for? They are the number of the paragraphs. Each paragraph receives a number. Do you see that? All the way through on page 77, paragraph number 20, turn the page 78, paragraph 21 to 27. Do you see it? And we have 27 paragraphs of this essay. Now, I'm teaching you one kind of reading annotative approach, and it's what we call the paragraph outline. You're going to use it a lot in the university. For those of you who are struggling with online classes, I'm about to give you the secret to knocking out of the park the online class. Almost everything that happens in online classes is driven by a textbook. You have to read stuff and then respond to it in some way. So the first step is knowing what the text is about. The way we do that is we take a blank sheet of paper, not unlike, as I was suggesting here, and you're going to number the number of paragraphs, okay? You'll either do this in advance, you know there's 27 paragraphs, or you'll do it as you go, sometimes easier because some paragraphs more information than other paragraphs. And then what you're going to do is you're going to read the first paragraph and you're going to reduce it to a single line in your own words. Now you're not copying anything out of the story or the essay and putting it on the page. You're going to translate it out of their language into your language, and you're going to write that down at number 1. Always remember, log in correctly. So for example, you'll always want to see on page 79, the title, I'm not leaving until I eat this thing, and the author is John T. Edge. But then notice, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, jumping over to page 82, paragraph 19. For each paragraph, you're going to jot down in your own words then what that paragraph's main idea or contribution to the overall argument is. As you go, you will begin to understand better what is the point that's being made. Then, if you come to class and the instructor wants to lecture on this information, well, guess what? You can play the game on the right-hand side of the line there. Or, how about this? What if you come to class and the instructor happens to give you some kind of pre-class or in-class quiz? Then you're ready for the material. Got me? So you're always preparing. We're using this then as an example of skill set development. We're going to practice it. Does that make sense, what I just said? And the way we're going to do it is to work specifically with the models for these chapters. Got me? So on your cover sheet, you're listing the titles. We already looked at a couple of them, didn't we, for Chapter 3. Then you're going to have blank sheets of paper, and you're just simply going to work with a paragraph outline that goes for each one of the paragraphs, one sentence. Now, you do not have to, for my purposes, draw a line down the center of the page. You can go all the way across the page to save paper. That will be fine. And we will assume that if we were playing the game in class of in-class lecturing, that you would just want to work with a different color ink, etc. Do you got it? Okay? Right now, I'm just interested in you practicing how to do this kind of reading. Because I would say it this way. Freshmen, especially at the university and the college level, about 85 to 90% of them have never annotated before. They do not understand the concept. They literally think that they should be able to sit down, read Chapter 7 of their history text, and remember all the information 3 weeks later on the exam. And then when it doesn't happen, they pretend like they're